I used to think silence meant peace. Now I know it can hide 1,000 things. Anger, betrayal, even hatred, all wrapped up in a quiet so thick it hums in your bones. My name is Margaret Ellison, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 52 years old, a retired social worker, and I used to believe I knew people. My job was to listen to stories, to pain, to lies whispered through polite smiles. I thought I could read anyone, but I never once tried to read my own family. I just trusted them. I thought love made you safe. I thought being mom meant I was unbreakable. Then came the day I realized I'd been living inside a performance. It started quietly, the way slow heartbreak always does. After my stroke, the doctors told me I had to slow down. No more long hours, no more late-night paperwork, no more stress. Focus on healing, they said. Your family will take care of you. And I believed them. I believed them. For the first few months, it felt like heaven. My husband Walter brought me tea in bed every morning. My daughter Nina took over the house chores. My son Malcolm even came home from college on weekends just to keep an eye on Mom. Everyone was so kind, so thoughtful. Too thoughtful. I didn't notice the distance at first, the way conversations stopped when I entered the room, or how Walter's phone always seemed to ring the moment I asked him a question. But after a while, the little things started to collect. The missed calls I was never told about, the whispers that floated through closed doors, the laughter that stopped too suddenly. And that one evening, the one that changed everything, when I overheard Nina say, "She's not going to be around forever anyway." She said it casually, like she was talking about a plant, not her mother. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall until dawn. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't understand. I'd spent my whole life loving these people, carrying them, forgiving them. But for the first time, I wondered if maybe they didn't see me at all. The next morning, while making coffee, I noticed how quiet the house was. No one talking, no footsteps, just the soft hum of the fridge and the slow drip of the coffee maker. And that's when it hit me. I didn't really know what went on in this house when I wasn't around. I'd always assumed I did, that love meant honesty. But love, I was starting to learn, doesn't always mean truth. So I made a decision. I ordered 6 tiny wireless microphones online. They arrived 2 days later, discreet little things, smaller than a coin, easy to hide. I remember holding them in my hands, feeling like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But when you've been the strong one your whole life, there comes a time when you stop asking for reassurance and start searching for proof. I spent a week planning everything. I mapped out the house like it was a crime scene. One mic in the living room, behind the framed family portrait. Another in the dining area, near the vent where conversations carried best. One inside the hallway vase, another near the garage where Walter made his late-night calls, one in Nina's study, and the last under the lip of the kitchen counter. Each time I placed one, I whispered a prayer. Not for forgiveness, for courage. The night I planted the last one, I couldn't sleep. My heart beat like I'd done something terrible, even though no one had been hurt. The guilt was heavy, but so was the curiosity. I wanted to hear love when I wasn't in the room, to know if the warmth I'd built still existed when I wasn't there to hold it together. For the first few days, I didn't listen to a thing. I told myself it was a bad idea, that good mothers didn't spy on their children, that loyal wives trusted their husbands, but that voice in my head, the one that sounded like every client I'd ever counseled, whispered, "Maggie, you of all people should know better. People are different when they think no one's watching." So one Sunday afternoon, when everyone was out, Walter at church, Nina at brunch, Malcolm back at school, I finally sat down in my small sunlit office, plugged in the receiver, and clicked on the first file. For a long moment, there was just static, soft, fuzzy, harmless. Then came the sounds of my house, familiar, comforting, the fridge door closing, the television murmuring, a chair scraping the floor. Then, voices. At first, they were ordinary. Walter asking Nina about groceries, Nina complaining about bills, both of them laughing about the neighbor's barking dog. It almost made me smile. Then Walter said something that made me freeze. Something about selling before she finds out. I leaned in closer, heart pounding. He didn't say what. He didn't say who. But the tone, calm, quiet, planned, made my stomach twist. Nina's voice followed. "Don't worry. She still thinks everything's in her name." And just like that, the room around me disappeared. I didn't even realize I was crying until I heard the small drip of tears hitting my lap. The sound of betrayal is strange. It's not loud or violent. It's soft, almost gentle. I sat there listening, frozen between disbelief and heartbreak, as the people I loved the most talked about me like I was a ghost haunting their home, and for the first time, I realized something terrifying. Maybe I was haunting it. Maybe, after my illness, after all the years of holding everyone up, I had become invisible, just another voice they'd learned to tune out. That night, I went to bed and stared at the ceiling for hours. I could still hear their laughter, their plans, their indifference echoing inside my head. By morning, I wasn't the same person anymore, because once you start listening to what people say when they think you're not there, you stop being the mother, the wife, the nurturer. You become the stranger watching from the dark. I don't know what it was about that morning, maybe the quiet, or maybe the way the sunlight spilled through the blinds like it was trying to expose something, but that was the first time the thought came to me. The kind of thought that sneaks up behind you, whispering like a secret you didn't know you already believed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my cup of coffee gone cold, listening to the clock tick. The house was empty. My husband, Charles, had gone off to his office like he always did. Clean suit, cologne too strong, a kiss on my forehead that felt more like routine than love. My daughter Naomi had rushed off to her nursing classes with her usual blend of perfume, panic, and eye rolls. And my son Ryan, well, he hadn't lived here in years, but somehow his shadow still sat at the end of that hallway, just like the memory of him arguing, laughing, promising to call and never doing it. It was strange. The older I got, the quieter the house became, yet somehow the noise in my head kept getting louder. I stared at the family photo on the wall, the one we took 3 years ago at the beach, all of us smiling like the world was perfect. I remember that day well. Naomi had been furious because her hair frizzed up from the salt water. Charles had been scrolling through his phone when the photographer said smile, and I had to nudge him with my elbow just to get him to look up. But in the photo you'd never know. You'd think we were the happiest family alive, and maybe that's what bothered me, the pretending, because lately I'd started feeling like a ghost in my own home, like everyone still saw me, but not really. They said all the right things. Get some rest, Mom. You've done enough. We love you. But their words sounded pre-packaged, like lines from a script they'd already practiced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that when I wasn't around, when I wasn't sitting at this kitchen table or standing in that doorway, they were different. It started with little things, the way Charles's voice would lower when I entered a room, how Naomi would switch tabs on her laptop when I walked by, how sometimes the front door would creak open late at night and I'd hear a muffled whisper, followed by silence. At first I told myself it was paranoia, side effects of too much time alone since my early retirement. But deep down I knew that wasn't it. I'd spent 30 years listening to other people's stories as a social worker. I'd learned to hear what wasn't being said. That morning, as I sat in the quiet, I heard something, not with my ears but with that gut sense that used to guide me through the hardest cases. It was the sound of something being hidden. I picked up my phone, typed something into Google, and hesitated. The words looked absurd on the screen. How to discreetly record conversations in your home. I deleted it, then typed it again, and that was how it started. Not with a plan, not with revenge, it wasn't about catching anyone. I just wanted to hear them, to know if I mattered when I wasn't in the room. That afternoon, I drove into town, still convincing myself it was harmless. I parked outside a little electronics shop tucked between a laundromat and a pawn store. Inside it smelled like dust and metal. Rows of gadgets lined the shelves, cameras, USB drives, voice recorders. A young man behind the counter looked up. "Help you with something, ma'am?" I smiled politely. "I'm looking for something discreet, to record conversations." He blinked. "Like for meetings?" I nodded. "Something like that." He led me to a glass case filled with tiny black devices, some disguised as USB chargers, others as pens. He showed me one that looked like a wall plug. "This one's popular. High-quality mic, long range, records automatically when it detects sound." I held it in my hand, pretending to inspect it, while my heart pounded so hard I could barely hear him. I wasn't a spy. I wasn't that kind of woman. But something about holding that little device made me feel like I was about to open a door I couldn't close. When I got home, I sat in the car for a long time before going inside. The house looked so innocent, flowers blooming by the porch, the wind chime my sister gave me swaying in the breeze. And yet inside those walls, something felt wrong. That evening, after Charles went to bed, I crept downstairs with the box in my hand. My palms were sweating. I unpacked the first microphone and plugged it into the outlet near the kitchen island, then another in the living room, one by the hallway, one in my daughter's room, behind her mirror, tucked so neatly she'd never notice. I moved through the house like a thief, barefoot, careful not to wake anyone. By the time I was done, the night was still and heavy, like the air was holding its breath with me. When I finally sat down, staring at the blinking red light on my laptop that meant everything was recording, I whispered to myself, "This isn't wrong, I just want to understand." But even as I said it, something inside me twisted, because deep down I knew, once you start looking for the truth, you have to be ready for what it sounds like. And I wasn't sure I was. I didn't plan to listen right away. I told myself I'd wait a few days, let the microphones collect enough before I peeked. But that first night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning in bed, eyes tracing the faint ceiling glow of the digital clock. 2:47 a.m., Charles's breathing was heavy beside me, the kind of deep, rhythmic snore of a man who carries no secrets, or at least believes no one will ever find them. I slipped out of bed quietly, every movement calculated. The floorboards knew my steps too well, creaking like tattletales. Downstairs, the house looked different in the dark, longer, quieter, older. I made my way to the kitchen table, turned on my laptop, and opened the program that showed the mic recordings. Tiny files already lined the screen, each with a timestamp. For a long time, I just stared at them. My hand hovered over the mouse, then I clicked the first one. Soft static, the hum of the refrigerator, the clinking of dishes, then Charles's voice. "You think she's okay?" Naomi's voice followed, faint but clear. "She's fine, Dad. You know how she is. She likes to worry." "I know, but since she stopped working, she's been different. I just don't want her losing it." I felt my chest tighten, but not from anger. At first it sounded like care, concern, love even. But there was a pause after that, and then Naomi laughed, a short, sharp kind of laugh that didn't sound like the girl I raised. "Losing it? Please. She just doesn't have a reason to boss people around anymore, that's all." Something inside me cracked, quiet but definite. I had to replay it twice to make sure I heard it right. My daughter, my Naomi, had always been fiery, blunt, too much like me at her age, but this sounded cold, detached, like she was describing a stranger. Charles chuckled softly. "You might be right. I mean, retirement didn't suit her well. Some people just need to feel needed, you know?" The rest of the recording was background noise, plates scraping, water running, the mundane rhythm of life, but the damage was already done. I sat there frozen, listening to my own family talk about me like I was gone, like I'd already faded into the furniture. My first instinct was to delete it, to pretend I never heard it, but curiosity, that dangerous little ember, flared again. I clicked on another file. This one was from the living room, late afternoon. Naomi was talking to someone on the phone. "No, I don't think she'll live here much longer. She keeps saying she wants to downsize, but we all know that means move into a home or something. Dad's already looking at condos." "Condos?" I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying not to make a sound. Then she added almost lazily, "Yeah, I mean if they sell the house, we'll split whatever's left. It's not like she's spending it on anything." I stopped breathing for a moment. My daughter, my blood, talking about my home, my life, my years of work and sacrifice, like assets in an auction. When I finally stood up, my legs felt unsteady. I walked to the kitchen sink, gripping the counter for balance. I'd spent most of my adult life cleaning that very counter, spilled milk, cookie crumbs, wine stains from family dinners, and now I realized the same people I'd cooked for, prayed for, cried over, were already planning how to live without me. I should have stopped then. I should have gone upstairs, erased everything, and let ignorance cradle me. But something inside me had already shifted. Curiosity had turned into hunger. I needed to know more. Over the next few days, I became an expert at pretending. I smiled at Naomi when she came home from school, asked about her grades, listened to her talk about exams. She never suspected a thing. Charles kissed my cheek every morning before work, just as he always did. But now I paid attention to the smell of his cologne, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his shirt collar. At night, I'd pour myself a glass of wine, sit by the laptop and listen. That's when I started noticing patterns. Naomi's calls, Charles's silences, the way he lingered in the kitchen after dinner, whispering into his phone. One recording captured him saying, "No, she doesn't know anything. Just keep quiet for now." That sentence haunted me. By week 2, the house had turned into a map of secrets. Every corner, every outlet, every light flicker carried a whisper, and I was the ghost haunting it. Sometimes I'd hear laughter, warm, familiar laughter from another room, but when I entered, the laughter stopped. Just the hum of the TV, the sound of forks clinking. Then one afternoon, while Charles was at work and Naomi was gone, I played a new file from the living room mic. The timestamp read Monday, 11:23 a.m. I wasn't home then. I'd gone to my doctor's appointment. It started with the door unlocking, then footsteps, then a woman's voice. "She's still gone." Charles's voice, low and nervous. "Yeah, but you need to be quick." I froze. My mind tried to deny it, but the evidence was right there. The muffled sound of him pouring a drink, her soft laugh, the faint clinking of glasses. Then unmistakably, a kiss. And my whole body went cold. I sat there for what felt like an hour, my hands trembling, eyes burning, listening to the faint sounds of betrayal unfolding in my living room. When the file ended, the silence that followed was unbearable. The house felt heavier, darker, like the walls themselves were ashamed. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I closed the laptop and looked around at the photos, the curtains, the sofa they'd sat on together, everything I thought I knew about my family, about love, loyalty, home, had started to dissolve, one recording at a time, but I wasn't done. If they could keep secrets, so could I. And if this house had ears, then from that moment on, so did I. The next morning, the sun rose too beautifully for what I was carrying inside me. You know those mornings that look like peace, orange light spilling across the blinds, birds chirping like they still believe the world is kind. That was the kind of morning I woke into, one that didn't deserve me. Charles was already in the kitchen when I came down. Bacon sizzling, coffee brewing, the smell of Sunday peace pretending to be real. I watched him from the hallway for a moment, the man I had loved for 30 years, humming softly to a song on the radio. His shoulders swayed to the rhythm, easy, natural, lying through every movement. And me? I smiled. That's what women like me are taught to do when our hearts break. We smile so nobody has to feel awkward about it. "Morning," I said, voice light, steady, the way it always had been. He turned, all warmth and ease. "Hey, sleepyhead. You okay?" I nodded, poured myself coffee, and asked how work was going. The same small talk, the same gentle laugh. I don't think he noticed how I studied every flicker of his expression, every hesitation. He didn't know that last night I'd watched my whole marriage fall apart in an audio file. When he kissed my cheek goodbye, the gesture felt different, softer, like guilt disguised as tenderness. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, and then just stood there, coffee growing cold in my hands. I told myself I needed proof, more than voices, more than guesses. I needed something undeniable. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went down to the basement, to the box of things I used to use for work. Old tape recorders, notebooks, cables, the kind of stuff I'd kept just in case. I found a small camera, no bigger than a button, and smiled to myself. The kind of smile you wear when you're crossing a line you know you'll never uncross. That afternoon, while Naomi was upstairs blasting music and Charles was still out, I placed the new camera inside the lamp on the bookshelf, perfect view of the living room, then another in the kitchen clock, one more near the back door. It wasn't just about catching them, it was about reclaiming something. My awareness, my control, my truth. That night, I cooked dinner like nothing had changed. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Naomi came down, scrolled through her phone as she ate, half listening to me talk about the neighbors. Charles poured himself a glass of wine, laughed at a joke I didn't tell. If anyone had walked in, they would have seen a picture-perfect family, but I was watching it all from behind my eyes, detached, like a guest in my own life. Later, after they went to bed, I crept downstairs again and checked the footage. It wasn't much, just a normal evening, filled with small talk and invisible tension, but there was one moment, just before I entered the room earlier, that froze me. Charles leaned toward Naomi, whispered something. I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I could read the lips. Not yet. Not yet what? The next day, I started keeping notes, timestamps, voices, phrases that didn't sit right. Condos. Not yet. She won't know. I filled an entire notebook in 3 weeks. By then, the recordings had become my secret ritual. Every morning after they left, I'd sit in my robe with a cup of coffee and listen, not for love anymore, but for truth. And it came, piece by piece. One file caught Naomi on the phone again. Her voice was sharp, irritated. "No, I told him to wait. She's still going through the mail. If she sees the letter before signing, it'll mess everything up." "Letter? What letter?" Another time, Charles was talking to someone I didn't recognize. A man's voice, deep, older, maybe from his company. "We'll get it cleared once her name's off. Don't worry, she trusts me." That same sentence again, "She trusts me." That night, when he came home, I watched him pour his drink slower than usual. He looked tired, or maybe just caught between the man he was and the man he'd become. I almost asked him about the letter but stopped, because for once, I had something stronger than questions. I had eyes where he didn't. Days bled into weeks, and soon, I wasn't just recording them, I was studying them, the way Charles checked his phone and turned slightly away from me each time, the way Naomi started locking her bedroom door when she left, the way my son Jamal stopped coming around altogether, answering calls less and less. At first, I thought it was distance, but the recordings told me otherwise. One afternoon, the mic in Naomi's room picked up a quiet conversation, her on the phone again. Her tone was soft this time, hesitant. "I don't like this, Dad. She's still Mom." Then his voice calm, steady. "Naomi, we've been through this. It's already in motion." In motion. I pressed pause, my hand trembling so badly the mouse slipped. I stared at the computer screen like it might blink back at me. What was in motion? I replayed the file over and over, trying to hear something more, some clue I'd missed, but the voices cut off there. That night I couldn't sleep. I just lay there beside Charles, his steady breathing slicing through the quiet like a cruel lullaby. And in the dark, I realized something chilling. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel safe beside the man I'd built my world around. I woke early, just before sunrise, and made myself coffee. The house was still, shadowed, silent. I sat by the window and watched the light crawl across the floor. I thought about everything I'd heard, the laughter, the lies, the planning. But mostly, I thought about the version of myself they'd built in their heads, fragile, forgetful, disposable. I smiled to myself then. Not the kind smile I used to give them, but something colder, sharper. If they wanted to see what I was like when I wasn't around, then they were about to meet her. Because from that day forward, I wasn't just recording them. I was setting a trap, and this time, they'd never see it coming. For weeks, I moved through my house like a ghost who had finally learned to walk among the living. Every smile, every nod, every good morning was carefully measured. They couldn't know I'd been listening, watching, piecing together every fragment of their conversations, every hesitation, every glance, and yet, inside, I felt almost untouchable, like the center of a storm only I could see. I started small, the pantry door left ajar, a glass slightly out of place, Naomi's laundry sorted just differently, clothes folded instead of tossed into the basket. Charles noticed, of course. He always notices, but he never said anything, and that was perfect. I'd place my coffee cup in a different spot each morning, watch where his eyes flicked. I learned which angles they preferred when talking to each other, how their voices softened or sharpened depending on who was listening. Every movement, every pause became part of my map. One evening, I watched Naomi in the living room. She sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling on her phone, earbuds in. Her laughter, light and practiced, floated into the air like a fragile bubble, but my recording had caught it all before. I knew her jokes, her timing, the little inflections in her voice that revealed impatience or irritation. I poured a glass of wine and sat at the dining table, laptop open. The camera feeds gave me angles they didn't know existed. I watched Charles move around the kitchen, preparing for dinner, speaking softly on the phone. I heard him whisper the words I'd been waiting for. "She's still in the dark. Everything is set. Just a few more days." My heart didn't race. It didn't spike. I just smiled. A thin, quiet smile. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calculating. That night, I started leaving little things around. Receipts, letters, emails left open on my laptop. Nothing incriminating. Nothing illegal. Just enough to make the air feel heavier, to test how far their secrets stretched. It worked. Naomi began double-checking her texts. Charles lingered by his phone longer than usual, glancing at me as if I might be reading his mind. And the house, my home, hummed with tension. One afternoon, I intercepted something that made my stomach twist. Naomi had a call with someone I hadn't heard before. "Mom's noticing small things now. We can't risk her finding out too soon." A pause. Then her voice, softer, almost remorseful. "I know, but it's already in motion. Dad's got it under control." That word again, in motion. It had been haunting me since the first recordings, and now I knew it wasn't just about a letter, a condo, or money. They had a plan that didn't include me. I didn't confront them. I didn't yell or cry. I simply recorded it, wrote it down, memorized every syllable. Then I went about my routine, cooking, cleaning, smiling, laughing at jokes they made, pretending everything was ordinary. But I was already changing the rules. I started testing them subtly. A door left slightly open, a note on the fridge, a misplaced key, little traps to see if anyone noticed, to see who really cared and who only moved through life while I was invisible. And they noticed. Oh, they noticed. Charles began checking on me more, his calm veneer slipping just slightly each day. Naomi started locking her bedroom door, hesitating when I asked questions, and every time I pressed play on the recordings, I could hear the strain in their voices, the carefulness, the guilt, the fear. I was learning them better than they knew themselves. Then one evening, as the sun set in gold and orange across the suburban rooftops, I heard something I wasn't expecting. Charles was on the phone again, but this time he sounded uncertain, hesitant. "I thought she wouldn't notice, but I think she's on to us." I froze. He thought I was oblivious. He thought I was still the same woman who quietly managed the house, the family, the chaos, without questioning. But he was wrong. So very, very wrong. That was when it hit me. I wasn't just observing anymore. I was inside their minds. I knew their thoughts before they could fully form them. And that gave me a dangerous kind of power, the kind that doesn't need words or confrontation, the kind that moves silently, quietly, like a shadow stretching across a wall. I poured another glass of wine and sat down with my laptop. The camera feeds glowed softly in the dim light, the little blinking dots of recording lights like watchful eyes. I sipped, letting the warmth spread through me. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel helpless. I felt alive, and I knew the next days would reveal everything. The truths, the betrayals, the hearts of the people I had loved my whole life. The calm eye of the storm had arrived, and I was at its center. By the time the next week arrived, the house felt heavier. Not physically, of course, but in the way shadows stretch longer when the sun sits low, and the air hums with unspoken words. Every room I entered seemed to echo with the secrets I had unearthed. My family moved around me, performing their daily routines, unaware that I was no longer just a part of that life. I was observing, analyzing, waiting. The first thing I noticed that morning was how careful Charles had become. He lingered in the kitchen, glancing at the cabinets and the fridge door, the way someone might check for a hidden camera without even knowing it. But I had placed my devices too cleverly for him to notice. I could watch him pace, rehearse what he said, repeat it in whispers to himself, all while I sat at the table, sipping coffee, pretending to grade a few letters I had saved from my former social work cases. Naomi, too, had changed. She no longer flopped onto the couch with her phone, carefree and unbothered. She tiptoed across the floorboards, her laughter smaller, forced, her conversations clipped, as if she were constantly measuring her words against an invisible ruler. Even Ryan, who had started visiting more often under the guise of reconnecting, seemed different, hesitant, guarded. Perhaps he had always been this way, or perhaps my absence had revealed something in him that even I hadn't anticipated. That evening, I made dinner as usual, roasted chicken, vegetables, rice, but I watched them eat as if I were seeing strangers in my own home. Their movements, their smiles, the way they passed the salt without looking me in the eye. It all felt rehearsed, as though they were actors performing for a hidden audience. After everyone had left for the evening, I went to the living room, laptop open, wine in hand. I clicked on the newest recordings, one after the other, each file a little window into the world they had created when I wasn't watching. I heard Charles talking on the phone again. The man's voice, calm and controlled, was dripping with caution. "She's been noticing things, small things, too small maybe, but enough. Don't push yet." A pause. His exhale trembled slightly. I thought she'd never question. She's always been the quiet type, but she's different now, smarter. sharper. I don't like it. My stomach clenched, not with fear, but with a strange thrill. For the first time in years, I was on equal footing. I wasn't just the wife, the mother, the caretaker. I was the observer, the one who knew what was coming, the one who held the knowledge that could unravel everything. And then Naomi's voice appeared. Dad, I don't think she's fooled. She's too precise. I tried. I really tried. Her voice cracked slightly. That sound alone would have made my heart ache if it weren't for the knowledge of what they had been plotting. But no, there was no ache, only clarity. They weren't plotting against each other. They were plotting against me. Against the woman who had given them everything and asked for nothing. Against the woman who had carried their childhoods, their dreams, their mistakes on her back, and now, after a lifetime of loyalty, was beginning to see the truth. The recordings grew darker, more calculated, more deliberate. I heard Charles coordinating with someone, not just discussing the document anymore, but what to do after it was signed. Naomi reinforcing instructions. The words timeline and finalize appeared repeatedly. My heart pounded with a strange, cold energy. I was outraged, yes, but also deeply alive in a way I hadn't felt in decades. And then, the truly shocking thing happened. I heard my own voice. I paused, confused at first, listening carefully. My voice in my own kitchen, humming softly, singing lines of a song I hadn't touched in years. But it wasn't me. I had not been home at that time. I had not hummed a note. Yet there it was, clear as day, my intonation, my subtle inflections, the same warmth I used to wrap around my family. I sat back in my chair, the wine untouched, the house dark around me. Someone had recorded me. Someone had been inside my life while I thought I was the one holding the power. That realization broke me, in a way, not completely, but it cracked the armor I had built so carefully around myself. I had believed that knowledge alone gave me control, but I hadn't anticipated someone else could be watching me in return. For the next few nights I became hyper-aware of everything, the creak of floorboards, the shadows that moved with the moonlight, the subtle click of doors closing a fraction too late or early. Every movement became a question, every sound a potential revelation. I had been trying to unearth the truth about my family. But now I realized the house itself was a mirror reflecting all of us, and I was not separate from it. I was entangled in a network of observation and deception. And yet, despite the fear and confusion, there was exhilaration. I had never felt more alive, more present, more aware of my own power. For the first time in years, I realized that I could choose my response. I could confront. I could wait. I could manipulate. I could finally protect myself in ways I hadn't imagined before. As I sat there staring at the tiny glowing dots of recording devices across the house, I whispered to myself, softly, almost reverently, I see you now, and you will see me too. Yesterday, my granddaughter Naomi called, crying about needing $3,000 for college books. Same sweet voice, same practiced tears, but this time, I saw right through it. Ask your mama, baby. Grandma's ATM is permanently closed. My hands didn't even shake when I hung up. By the time the following week arrived, the house no longer felt like mine, or maybe it did in a way I hadn't understood before. Every corner, every hallway, every faint creak of the floorboards carried meaning. I had begun to see my home as a living entity, a network of secrets and whispers, each room a node in a vast map of betrayals and half-truths, and at the center of it all was me, Margaret Maggie Ellison, no longer invisible, no longer passive. I moved through the house with an ease that only comes from deep observation. Every gesture, every glance, every word I spoke was calculated. I greeted Naomi in the morning with the same warmth I always had, asking about school, commenting on her hair, making a small joke that made her laugh. She laughed, but differently now, a careful, measured laugh, the kind someone uses when they know they're being watched. Charles noticed too. I saw it in the subtle way he adjusted his tie, how his hand lingered over the kitchen counter a little longer than necessary, his eyes flicking toward me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He didn't know that I was paying attention, that I had been all along. That evening, after everyone had left for their evening routines, Naomi to her room, Charles to a phone call that went longer than usual, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled at the dining table with my laptop. The camera feeds were open, the recordings lined up, and I started to watch, not just to observe, but to understand. And then it happened, the first direct evidence that they had underestimated me. A conversation, captured almost by accident on one of the new cameras that revealed Naomi whispering to someone on her phone, her tone urgent. "It's almost ready. Mom's noticing things, but she won't figure it out if we move carefully." The words were deliberate, heavy with intent. My stomach clenched, not with fear, but with a cold determination. My own daughter speaking as though I were a problem to be managed. I pressed pause and stared at the screen. My hand shook, not from anger, but from clarity. I realized then that I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was reconstructing my entire life from the fragments they thought I'd never access. Every lie, every secret, every manipulation, they were all there, laid bare. The next day, I began a new phase. I would not confront them openly. That would be too simple, too predictable. Instead, I created subtle situations that forced the truth to emerge without them realizing it. I rearranged mail, leaving certain envelopes in plain sight. I casually asked questions that seemed innocent, but were designed to provoke reactions. I adjusted schedules, moving things around in ways that would make them slip up, reveal intentions, or contradict each other. It worked. Naomi began snapping at small things, her laundry, her phone, even at me, under the guise of teenage frustration. Charles's careful control started to fray. One evening, I overheard him in the garage, speaking in hushed tones. "She's sharper than we thought. Don't push too hard yet, or we lose everything." Everything. The weight of the words sank into me. They weren't just planning around me, they had assumed I would never see it, never understand it, never fight back. I smiled then, softly, almost imperceptibly. For decades, I had been the silent backbone, the one holding everyone together. I had sacrificed dreams, desires, and comfort to keep the household running. And now, finally, I could see the skeletons hiding beneath the walls I had built with love and care. Over the next several days, I continued my quiet manipulation. I left subtle clues for Charles to notice, a misplaced document here, a faintly altered schedule there. I tested Naomi, leaving notes she would discover, carefully phrased questions that would force her to speak her thoughts aloud. And each time, the responses came exactly as expected. Every lie, every omission, every carefully planned action was revealed in its natural, unguarded form. And then, one evening, I reached the climax of this quiet orchestration. Everyone was in the living room, casual, relaxed, unaware of the unseen audience that had been watching them for months. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the center of the room, pretending to read, my eyes occasionally flicking toward them. Then I began to speak, softly at first, almost conversationally, as though sharing a memory. It's funny, isn't it? How we think we know the people closest to us, how we assume love is unconditional, that loyalty is guaranteed, and yet, I paused, letting my words hang. Naomi and Charles glanced at each other nervously. Sometimes the truth waits in silence, sometimes it waits for you to leave the room. I watched them, saw the color drain from their faces. Their small, controlled smiles faltered. The air thickened, charged with guilt and fear. For months, I had been listening, watching, learning, and now the balance had shifted. They were the ones being observed, measured, analyzed, and for the first time in years, the power was mine. I set my glass down, deliberately, slowly. "I know everything now," I said softly, letting the words ripple through the room. "Not just the small things, not just the careless remarks. I know the plans, the intentions, the secrets you thought were buried." Silence, a thick, suffocating silence, filled only by the sound of my own steady breathing. And in that silence, I realized something profound. The truth doesn't always hurt in the way you expect. Sometimes it empowers, sometimes it awakens a part of you that has been dormant for decades. For the first time in my life, I felt untouchable, observant, alive, and I knew, without a doubt, that the final revelations were yet to come. But the game had changed, the mirror had been held up, and they could no longer hide. The house was quiet that morning, in a way that felt almost unnatural. Even the birds outside seemed to hold their breath. I moved through the rooms deliberately, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floors, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The cameras, the microphones, the countless recordings I had collected over the past year, they had all led to this moment. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was something sharper, something colder. Clarity. Charles was in the kitchen, sipping his coffee, glancing at the papers on the counter. Naomi was in her room, headphones in, scrolling on her phone with that same distracted expression she wore so often. Jamal hadn't come down yet, probably lost in the world of his own making, but I knew he was listening too. Everyone was. They just didn't know how much. I carried my laptop into the living room and placed it on the coffee table. The cameras had captured months of betrayal, manipulation, and quiet plotting. Every suspicious phrase, every whispered conversation, every glance that had once passed unnoticed now had context, clarity, and weight. And today they would see it all. I started with the recordings, short clips, carefully selected, beginning innocuous, almost mundane. A laugh here, a conversation there, each one gradually revealing the cracks in the veneer of normalcy. Charles's face shifted subtly when the first clips played. He smiled, thinking perhaps they were just innocuous moments, harmless evidence of everyday life. Naomi tensed next to him, recognizing her own voice, but unsure where this was going. Then I began weaving the narrative. I spoke softly, measured, letting the weight of my words fall between us like a slowly growing storm. You know, I always believed that love isn't just what you say, it's what you show when no one is watching. And I believed that my family loved me, not because I asked, not because I reminded them, but because it was natural. But the past year has shown me otherwise. I paused, letting the words settle. They shifted uncomfortably. Every smile I had once returned now felt like a shield against the truth I was about to reveal. The next clips were sharper, heavier. Naomi whispering to someone on the phone, Charles coordinating a plan I had never fully understood until now. Even Jamal, the youngest, caught in snippets of conversations that revealed complicity he didn't even know he was caught in. I watched their faces as they listened, as recognition, fear, and disbelief unfolded in real time. The careful composure they had maintained for months crumbled quietly but unmistakably. And then I pressed play on the final clip, a recording I hadn't even realized existed until a few days prior. It was my own voice, not singing or speaking, but the sound of me moving through the house, unaware that someone else had been there. The realization hit them as hard as it had me months ago. They were being observed in return. Silence. I let it stretch, let them sit in it, the weight of their own duplicity pressing down like the thick Georgia summer air. I wanted to see who loved me, I said finally, my voice calm but unwavering. Not the convenient love, not the love that serves your interests or your plans. I wanted to hear the truth. And now I have. I know who you are when you think I'm not looking. I know what you value, and I know who is loyal to this family, and who is not. Charles's shoulders slumped slightly. Naomi's lips pressed together, eyes wide. Jamal avoided my gaze completely, shuffling nervously. But I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't accuse. That wasn't my goal. I was beyond rage. This was about power, clarity, and reclaiming the dignity that had been quietly undermined for years. We all live with secrets, I continued, but some secrets have consequences. Some words, once spoken, can't be unspoken. And some betrayals can't be forgiven, not without acknowledgement. I could see it then, the weight of realization in their eyes, the first flickers of guilt, of fear, of regret. They had built a world thinking I would never see it for what it was. And now the mirror was held up, reflecting every lie, every plot, every deception. I closed my laptop and looked at them, really looked, the people I had raised, loved and trusted, standing in my living room, exposed and silent. The family I had carried through decades of sacrifice, health scares, and quiet heartbreak now revealed in their truest forms, and in that moment I felt a strange, profound peace. Not because the truth had set me free, that's never how it works, but because I had finally seen it all. I had the knowledge, I had the clarity, I had the power that comes from understanding. They would need time to process, to face themselves, to reckon with what they had done, and I would rebuild, not from anger, but from the certainty that I was no longer invisible, no longer secondary, no longer silenced by love or duty or habit. I stood tall, unshaken, and walked to the window, watching the late afternoon light spill across the quiet suburban street. I whispered to no one in particular, though the house seemed to listen. I see you, I always have, and now you will see me too. The reckoning was complete, and for the first time in years, Margaret Ellison was fully, powerfully, undeniably herself.